minä käisin karjateedal Singsale pro. Kaua minä käisin karjateedal Singsale pro. Mis minä leidsin karjateedal Singsale pro. Mis minä leidsin karjateedal Singsale pro. Leidsin tamme nuttemasta Singsale pro. Leidsin tamme nuttemasta Singsale pro. Miksi sinä nuttat tammekkeene Singsale pro? Miksi sinä nuttat tammekkeene Singsale pro? Mind on yksi sija jäetut Singsale pro. Mind on yksi sija jäetut Singsale pro. Sija taiva tuule kätte Singsale pro. Sija taiva tuule kätte Singsale pro. Ära sinä nutta tammekkeene Singsale pro.
Millenniums ago, when our distant forefathers settled the territories of Estonia, there were primeval forests here. Nearly all Estonia was covered with thick, coniferous and mixed forests. Forests looked quite different then. The oak used to be one of the most well-spread trees for very long periods. During the millenniums following the last ice age, the climate of Estonia has not been the same. Relatively warm and dry periods have alternated with colder and damper ones. The first trees to spread on the land now, free of ice, were birch, alder and pine. And somewhat later also hazel and elm came to our forests. Oaks and lime trees reached the territory of Estonia during the next warming up period. The fir tree, the most common tree of the present Estonian forests, belongs to the last newcomers. If it were only for the fir tree to decide, it would no doubt conquer the greater part of the most fertile soils of Estonia. The fir tree is tough, vigorous and unpretentious. In its character, the fir tree is quite similar to an Estonian. Maybe that is why, feeling the congeniality of souls, old Estonians placed the fir tree as the pillar of their dwelling. Also, the makers of musical instruments found that the fir tree is the best tree to make the zither. Estonians belong to the oldest natives of Europe. The oldest findings telling us about the first settlements come from the 8th millennium before Christ. Our forefathers lived mostly in the forests surrounding water bodies. They preferred lakes and rivers to the sea. It was safer there and much easier to fish. Linguists affirm that the words connected with the water bodies and trees are very old, of ancient origin. The forest has been the complicated and mysterious surroundings that has shaped the Estonians' way of thinking and their temperament. The emotional and inner life of those living in the forests differs remarkably from that of the people living in mountains or in the open. Open countries and coastal regions make people crave for long distances, but amidst the forest, the urge to stay where you are grows stronger and stronger. The forest hides the distances. While the sea and wide expanses teach us to direct our steps in a very straightforward way, then the forest makes us lose the feelings of spaciousness and makes us move on fumbling crookedly. The forest does not enable the animals to live in big herds, neither does it enable people to live together in large numbers. The solitude of primeval forests has increased our patience and tenacity, but also our reticence and self-absorbedness. At the same time, the forest encouraged us to be an attentive observer, encouraged us to see and explain natural phenomena. Eventually, it was understood that the surrounding world need not be hostile, but it may turn hostile if you do something wrong. If, for example, a deaf-mute child was born, it was explained with a supposition that someone from the family had killed young birds. The experience of hundreds of generations led to an observation that if the man is hostile towards wildlife, he will be punished, but if he is friendly, then in reward he will receive an advantage, a favor. The forest that led its peculiar life also seemed to be the abode of wicked forces and kind spirits. A special and varied preventive magic developed in order to resist the evil and wicked forces. Originally, the birch trees that were brought into the houses were meant to keep off the evil forces. Only many centuries later, it was done for the sake of beauty on St. John's Day or on wedding days to decorate the rooms. Estonian national calendar includes a lot of various days of significance. In the spring, on the Earth Rest Day, it was not allowed to plow, to pick a flower, or do any harm to a tree. Such prohibitions set certain limitations to everyday activities, and in this way balance between the man and the wildlife held out for millenniums. For the ancient Estonian, forest was an enormous and mysterious spiritualized being. It was believed that also the nature lives in the same way as a human being. Every single tree and the forest as a whole seemed to have a peculiar temperament. Actually, the same happens to the tree as to the human being. The periods of growing and blossoming alternate with the periods of the leaves turning yellow, with the falling ill or breaking down, in the end with leaving this world, with death. While thinking about the forest, you needn't have worried about the wicked forces, but you also had to please the nymph and the elves of the woods. They were the guardian spirits who guarded over the trees and plants, birds and animals in the woods, and took care of them. They were also called fathers of the woods, mothers of the woods, or even the kings of the woods. But the kind and good-natured spirits were also ready to frighten if there was any improper behavior concerning them or their possessions. The good spirits were believed to help the one who had lost his way in the forest. The spirits of the forests were considered almighty, but only this person could expect his help who had earned it with his deeds. Keeping off the evil forces and maintaining good relations with the good spirits, the Estonians living in ancient forests did not become a conquering nation or heroic people. Maybe that is why we meet violence and destruction and killing of living beings in Estonian folk belief so very seldom. It seems that it was not the desire for power, but the creativity that inspired our forefathers. Their vitality was meant to create something, to do something with their own hands. Conquests did not become for the ancient Estonians living amid forests their basic activities. The great primeval forests covering Estonia and the severe climate imposed a different fight on Estonians. A long-lasting fight with stones and stumps, with hunger and winter. Approximately 300 years ago, the forests began to make way for fields. Glades and limestone regions were chosen as the best places for yields. But after some years, the decrease in yields was so great that those thin soils had to be left to lie fallow, and the fight with virgin forests began. For the first time, the trees and forests proved to be a great hindrance in a man's daily life. In order to have more arable land, there was only one possibility: to force the forest to recede with fire. To make a field out of a woodland area, it is really hard work. Most painstaking was the first start. Before setting fire to the wood, the bark had to be removed from the trees at a man's height, and now the trees had to be left drying up for 3 years. The fire was starting, its effect, might, and heat spreading in every direction, and the smoke covering the heavens must have been something special for ancient Estonians, something like a hell. After the woodland was assaulted for the first time, the procedure was a bit different. The thicket and the young stand that had grown on the fallow for some 10 or 15 years was cut down. In the middle of the assault, some bigger seed trees were left to grow so that the young forest would grow faster. The next spring, in April or May, such a division was set on fire. In the course of 3 or 4 years, such an assart field gave from 9 to 12 seeds. The later sowings did not pay anymore. In this way, new fields were started in South and East Estonia only 3 or 4 centuries ago. During the first 2,000 years of assalting, wooded territories of Estonia decreased a lot. One of the main reasons for the perishing of woodlands is said to be assalting. Obviously, they keep in mind the fact that more often than not, great forest fires started in this way. The axe was first brought to the territory of Estonia some 2,000 years ago. Now they started to cut down trees on very vast territories, which gave a decisive rise to till the woodlands. By the 13th century, long cultivated fields had replaced a greater part of the former woodlands. Reclaiming of woodlands gradually transformed the location of Estonians and made cultivation of land their main occupation. The first written records of the disappearance of ancient forests and of the expansion of grain growing originate from the 14th and 15th centuries. In the 17th century, both the fields of a manorial estate and of small farms were increased at the cost of the best woodlands. In a book published in 1645, it is recommended to use oak woods for starting new fields, and those woods were followed by hilly grounds with birch trees. In the second half of the 17th century, there was even a shortage of timber. Once great oak forests grew on the most fertile soils of Estonia, but today we rarely meet them. Only at the bottom of some rivers we can find the fossilized giant oak trees. But the oak, the iron of the farmer, survived in a quite different way. At the beginning of the 19th century, while Estonians were given their family names, the names of the trees, and especially the oak, were the most popular names the Estonians chose. It took some 2,000 or 3,000 years before the so-called forest people on the Estonian territory became the people who were involved in farming and cattle raising. At the beginning of the second millennium AD, the activities of Estonians were divided between the forest and the long-cultivated fields. Long-cultivated fields and log buildings had made life settled in one place. The future seemed to be a bit more secure. But still our forefathers had their farms near woods and forests. Those people who lived in more open country planted various forest trees round their farms. Step by step, by moving away from the forest, dispersed settlement developed in Estonia. Farms were located far apart from each other amidst their own fields and woods. And also relations between the man and the forest changed. The forest was not as close anymore as it had used to be. The forests surrounding the fields and meadows that seemed to be even somewhat hostile were now on the borderlands of the daily life. In the course of centuries, the long-cultivated fields grew in size, but they could not drive out the forest from the hearts of the Estonians. In their daily toil, the Estonian old folks still had time to observe all kinds of signs of nature. The moon was like a hand of the clock of nature. Old Estonians knew very well what was to be done in a new moon or in an old moon. What activities are the most successful when the moon is waning or when waxing? When the moon is waning, it is the best time for planting conifers, but in the waxing moon, broadleaf trees. So the moon and its movements were followed very carefully, but also everything what happened in the forest was closely observed. Now going to the forest meant leaving the secure home. It meant entering something strange and large. Certain customs and rules had to be observed in order to ensure the good-natured attitude of the forest. The spiritual link created in this way enabled the keen observation of the ever-changing wildlife. Estonians tried to find signs on the trees that could give hints as to fixing the proper time for sowing or to foretell your fortune. Some trees or groves were noticed, or at least supposed to possess peculiar qualities or even supernatural powers. Estonians did not erect temples, they turned to nature for help. Separately standing sacred trees or small untouched groves or coppices served as temples for Estonians. The word hees, a sacred grove, originally meant a burial place, which later on became the place of sacrificing. There have been some 500 sacred groves in Estonia. In most cases, the sacred grove was situated in a coppice on a hill. Very often it was the oak wood that was chosen for the sacred grove, where ancient Estonians are believed to have had the statues of their own gods. The sacred trees, stones and springs were believed to be great sources of strength that protect and help people in trouble. The sacred grove was the place not only for praying and sacrificing, but also for judging and taking counsel. In the sacred grove, one was not to cut or chop trees, to pick berries under the sacred trees, or harm the grove in any other way. It could have brought along a great misfortune. The destruction of sacred groves and trees started with the spread of Christianity on the Estonian territory. The missionaries erected their own chapels in the holy places of ancient Estonians. The centuries-long pressure of Christianity could not root out from the souls of our people the customs and beliefs connected with sacred groves. Folk tradition has that sacred groves were a part of our culture, a part of ourselves. Here and there, sacred groves were used as burial places even in the 17th and 18th centuries. But also the present-day cemeteries in Estonia are located in a coppice, in this way retaining the traditions and beliefs that the souls of the dead go into the trees. It is quite strange, but even today we believe in the trees, that they help and support us. In South Estonia we can see thousands of signs of the cross have been cut into the tree trunks. Those crosses are to show that the funeral procession stopped here and cut the sign into the tree. Every cross denotes the wish to protect the soul of the deceased so that it would not fall into the hands of evil forces. Even today, the sacred groves are believed to be the sources of the vitality of our people. Very often we can find small ribbons on sacred trees tied there in belief that the tree will help with its special power. Today, however, we can rarely see people going to the sacred grove, as very few sacred groves have survived the storms of history that have raged in Estonia. But why do the thoughts of the present-day people more often go to the nature worshipping of ancient Estonians? Why have they in Estonia started restoring sacred groves and reviving old traditions? Maybe because we have moved too dangerously far away from wildlife. Or maybe because we are not able to see every single tree and the whole wood as alive and possessing a soul. Ancient Estonians knew that every tree has its own soul. This idea is expressed in the Estonian word tõiv, which probably later on developed into the word tõotus, promise. Originally, this word tõiv meant a band made of straw, twigs, blossoms, or of anything that had magic power. It was bound round a tree or anywhere as a gift to another being with whom a visible contract was made, keeping in mind a simple principle: I shall give to you, in return you will give to me. This sacrificial band symbolized the visible contract with other forces. The most attractive characteristic of our predecessors' religious system was its deep understanding of wildlife. Everything was treated as one's equal. The old folks did not consider themselves higher than wildlife. People did not consider themselves to be the kings of nature who demand of everybody indisputable submission. Our forefathers respected the principle of mutual tolerance. The way you treat me, I treat you. If the man spoils or mars, contaminates or pollutes the nature surrounding him, then the nature may answer with the same. The wood may lead you astray. The water may drown you. The soil and animals may fall ill. Our predecessors' attitude towards a wood or a water body was not as an enemy. It is actually the relation between the associates understanding each other, the relations between the allies confirmed with a promise, tõiv. It is not so very easy for us to understand the inner life of ancient Estonians who had been shaped by the centuries-long fight for existence. It seems to be true that the so-called Stone Age has never existed in Estonia. All through the millenniums, we have enjoyed the Wood Age and forest culture. In the course of centuries, Estonians acquired a deep understanding of nature and wildlife. The main principle was everything in this world leads an equal life and is a part of the whole. Maybe we should listen to what ancient Estonians have got to tell us about life and existence. Maybe we can come closer to each other in the wintry silence and solitude. Estonians were shaped not only by the relations with the virgin forests, but by some other powerful and far-reaching force. This force manifests itself as a strict teacher, sometimes as a striking creator of beauty. Those colors and shapes created by the nature may go deep into the human soul, in this way taking your thoughts away from your daily routine somewhere higher and farther. The silence of hundreds and thousands of winters made Estonians also self-absorbed thinkers. Just this unique combination, the schooling provided to us by the Nordic forests and severe winters, gave us the greater part of what has been necessary for creating our original culture. The forest in winter may be like a temple of nature that encourages the people once there to go deeper from the surface, to see further from their own yard, to have even stars in their dreams and fantasies. Most probably, in the silence of the deep snow in winter, the ancient Estonians tried to find connections with entirety, and they found it in the bosom of the moon and starry skies, in the depth of forests and fields. From the deeds and words of our predecessors, we can read out that they have been very well aware of the fact that the tree has a tree soul, that a human being has a soul of a human being, that a bird has a bird's soul, and somewhere, in a not understandable way for us, all those different souls are interwoven. They are connected with each other. They are dependent on each other. They form an inseparable whole, an integrity. This is the reason why the children of the Nordic forests said, "The forest treats us in the way we treat the forest."